Welcome to the Fine Print, everybody. I'm Caleb Teskey, and I am joined tonight by Suzie Kelleher from Swanton, Vermont. Suzie, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I wanted to say also, thanks for introducing me to your son. That was a great talk we had earlier, and I thought he was super polite and well-spoken. And he sent me a nice text message after we talked, thanking me for not interrogating him.
Good.
Yeah, he was a good kid. I like him.
Good.
Cool. So I like to start off by doing what I call the 5-minute life story. So if you could tell all the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and just so they can know who I'm talking to here.
Okay, my name's Suzie Kelleher. I was born in Vermont. I moved to Swanton when I was 5. I've lived here pretty much all my life, except for when I was in the military. I was active duty Navy for 2 years. And then I was in the National Guard for 13 years. And I was medically discharged from the Vermont Army National Guard because I had a neurological disorder and the result from an injury. I have 3 kids, married to my husband of 20 odd years, and we've lived in Swanton since I was pregnant for Jake. So we've lived here together for 18 years.
Right on. Could I ask you a little bit about your military career?
Sure, go ahead.
Where were you at? Where were you stationed? What were you doing? How'd you get hurt? I don't know if that's something you're willing to
Oh,
share,
no,
but
that's fine. So I was in the Navy right out of high school. I went to, at that time, we had boot camp for females in Orlando, and that's where I went to boot camp. I did not have a rate. I was an undesignated striker. And so I was sent on the USS Shenandoah out of Norfolk, Virginia, where I was a boatswain's mate, basically. And I did that for 2 years. I was discharged. I came back home. While I was in the Army National Guard, it was just this freak accident. I was moving a desk with another soldier, and I dislocated my knee. And weirdly, because of that, I developed what's known as complex regional pain syndrome, which is a neurological disorder. And I was discharged because of that.
damn. Have you recovered from that?
I'm in what they call remission. It never really goes away,
Damn.
but I definitely had some. That was about, let me see, 12 years ago. So in that 12 years, I've definitely had demons to fight, mental health issues. I have PTSD, I have panic attacks, I have anxiety, I have major depression. And I use cannabis to help me with all that. And got off opioids, got off all medication.
Wow.
I was on opioids for 10 years, and it caused me to have long QT syndrome, which is a heart arrhythmia. And then so stopping opioids, getting off that, now, years later, I'm about 4 years out from that, my arrhythmia has cleared up.
Wow. And how much of that would you attribute to using cannabis?
Probably most, definitely a lot of it, because the cannabis helps keep me calm. It keeps the panic attacks at bay. Although in the morning I still wake up from nightmares. But then, I take some tincture and usually I'm fine. I don't use every single day, once or twice a week, but I don't have nightmares every day. So when I'm feeling anxious, I also have a service dog, by the way, so he helps a lot too. So between the service dog and the cannabis, that's pretty much how I get through life.
Wow. Just a couple times a week you're using, huh?
Yeah, with the tincture, and then I use gummies and the other couple times, and that's about it. I mean, I don't really smoke it. And this is going to sound really weird, but I was hypnotized to stop smoking cigarettes.
Huh.
And now I can't even smoke cannabis.
It worked.
Yeah.
Wow. But wow, that's wild.
It
But you
doesn't
also
work for
can't smoke.
everybody, but
Okay.
it did
Yeah,
for me.
cool. Now I thought this was a fascinating case. When I first started this, it was just kind of a thing to gather some other varying viewpoints from my own, because I've only talked with people that are totally for um, retail sales. And I found this to be kind of a fascinating case because you said that you are for retail sales, but you vote against it.
I am for retail sales. And, you know, I believe in the rec market. I believe in, knowing where your cannabis is coming from and having quality cannabis. The reason I voted against it in my town is because there's some shady stuff going on. I initially voted for it in the
You did?
first vote.
Wow.
I did. And then I started to hear about this shady stuff.
And that was just a month ago or so, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was back
Wow.
in March.
Wow. Okay.
And then I started hearing about the shady stuff. And I was like, oh, I can't get behind that.
Now I want to dive in to some of this stuff. First of all, I wanted to ask, have you attended any of the public meetings or gone to comment or anything like that?
So I have watched the public meetings through Northwestern Access TV.
Yeah.
I have spoken to several of my friends who have knowledge and how do I want to put this? Have an in with the village trustees.
Okay.
So I'm getting secondhand information, but from a reliable source.
Sure. Could you explain a little bit about the difference between the town and the village votes on this issue?
Sure. So the way Swanton Village and Swanton Town work is that Swanton Village votes on its own financial measurements. We pay a tax that goes to pay the police department, the fire department, our own highway department. The village has its own highway department. And then any issues that have to do with the village. And then being a person who lives in the village, I'm also able to vote in the town. And the town also has a highway department, financial things that they take into consideration, and then a contract that is voted on with the police and the fire department. Now, the people who live in the town of Swanton do not vote on village matters. So it's almost like the people in the village, their vote carries more weight because they're voting for both the village and the town, and the people in the town only get to vote for the town. If that makes sense the way I explain that.
It does. Now, when the first vote, I understand something got messed up. So like the village voted and the town didn't get to, or vice versa.
Right. So the first vote was just the village people voting, the village voters voting on whether there should be retail cannabis in the village of Swanton. And from what I understand, because the town select board was unaware that the village trustees had placed the vote on the ballot for March, they were unprepared to place that vote on a town ballot. There was no petition by the village to put forth this vote. So the town did not have it on their ballots for town meeting day.
And now you said this most recent vote, they got to vote on this without having to petition at all. Is that correct?
And again, yes, the town made a vote to approve cannabis within the town. And that again was not petitioned, it was just added to this vote, which the initial reason for today's vote was to vote on the budget for the school board, which was voted down.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah.
Is it unusual to have a vote on something when a petition has not been signed?
It's very unusual in my opinion. Just recently, the Abenaki Nation wanted to petition the town of Swanton for a 2022 tax exempt due to what was signed in legislation, being like the Abenaki headquarters is not taxable anymore. It was just signed into law by Governor Scott not too long ago. And they were going to petition to be forgiven for their 2002 taxes, but they didn't garner enough signatures to have that placed on the ballot. So I find it odd that we can place retail cannabis on the ballot, but we cannot place the Abenakis being tax exempt on the ballot without signatures.
Yeah, it does seem like they've sort of made an exception for one thing and then kind of not made an exception for something else that's pretty similar there. So I wanted to get into this. This is what your son talked to me about, and this was his objection, was sort of this conflict of interest between town and village officials and maybe the local Masons Lodge.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit.
Okay, so when I started to understand shortly after the first vote was voted down that the Masons were really pushing the issue of retail cannabis, was because I had heard that that Jack had broached the renting the Masons space from the Masons for the dispensary. So that was the first that I had heard about. It was after the vote. Then I started to hear that we were going to have a revote on this issue, which I thought was kind of weird that we were having a revote when we had already voted, the village had already voted it down. And the town people don't vote on village issues. So that seemed odd to me. And then I started to hear that people who are Masons were pressing my son to vote yes on the revote. And, be it a family friend, be it my own father, who is a Mason, calling from Florida saying, hey, you should really vote yes on this because the Masons really need the money. That's when, to me, it seemed like there's something more to this that we're not seeing. There's more information that we're not getting. And yeah, while it's just rent money, what this doesn't sound, it sounds sus.
So were there any other locations that were proposed as potential spots for the dispensary, or was it only the Masons Lodge?
I only know that the Masons Lodge was the place that it was going to go. I had never heard that it was going to go anywhere else. When I had first heard, oh, we're going to vote on this retail cannabis issue, and I had asked, well, where's it going to go? People would just say vaguely Merchants Row. And there's another empty storefront on Merchants Row where the drugstore used to be.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And so my thought was, well, maybe it's going to go there because, it's set up was a drugstore, so it's set up for that
Yeah.
kind of business.
Yeah, right. That would make sense.
And that made sense to me, and I thought, well, that makes sense, it's a good idea. And then when I started hearing that it was going to go into the Masons property, and then hearing that Masons are pressing not only my 18-year-old but also my 20-year-old to vote yes, I was starting to be like, well, what is in this for them? This doesn't make, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not like, the Masons are going to take over the world. I like the Masons. I have nothing against the Masons. My problem is that you have two people who have a say in what goes on the ballots in the town, in the village, who are Masons, who are pushing this vote without a petition and without, why did it have to happen today? Why couldn't it wait until next town meeting day? What's the hurry?
Well, I think some of the hurry is outdoor growers are trying to get their seeds into the ground this year, but also I'm not sure if that kind of trumps, procedure where you have to petition and do these things through the normal channels. And I'm certainly sympathetic to, I have friends who are waiting to grow outdoor, but that certainly seems like they made an exception there that doesn't happen most of the time.
Right. And also, if we made an exception for retail cannabis, why did we not make an exception for the Abenakis taxes?
Sure. I mean, why not make an exception for everything if you're going to just make exceptions?
Well, exactly.
Where you draw the line, really.
Where do you?
So I wanted to ask you, who are these Masons? I know your son told me about Brian Savage. He's the former state rep, and he's a town administration in Swanton, and
Yeah,
he's the president of the Masons Lodge. Who is the other guy?
The other guy, to my knowledge, is Neil Spear, who is the village president. He is a member of the Masons.
And he also owns a pretty large construction company, doesn't he?
He does.
Mm-hmm. So they're already probably fairly well off. Is that fair to say?
That is probably a fair thing to say, yes.
Yeah. Boy, and you mentioned something else that was interesting, and you said that despite the fact that the vote has not gone through yet, that people have already put money down to hold space for the dispensary in that Masons Lodge building.
Yes, so I have heard from a reliable source that the dispensary company has placed a hold on that property, and from my understanding, money has changed hands.
Wow. So what's your take? I mean, how many people live in Swanton?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
No. Was there a lot of people out voting?
No, like I told you earlier, I had seen briefly on Facebook that the town measure had passed 190 to 159. So it's about 300 something people voting. That's quick maths.
That's ballpark. Yeah.
And there's more than that who live in the town. There's more than 350 people who live in the town. The village numbers haven't come in yet, but again, so my problem with the village is when you look at the first, right after the vote, they said that the town would be the ones to vote, and that retailers would be allowed within the town limits, but not necessarily the village limits, since we had voted it down. And then recently they were saying that we had the opportunity to reverse our town meeting vote, which I just find odd.
Yeah, is that something that usually happens, or is that
no? Because usually, if we vote no on something, it's no. I mean, so here's the thing: if somebody was going up against one of the trustees or the village president and they won by 6 votes, would they have a revote on that? Or, I mean, if they lost by 6 votes, would they have a revote on that? You
Yeah, that's
know,
a great question. I feel
I
like I
mean,
know the answer to that question,
us
but I don't want to speculate.
in our house, we seem to think we know the answer to that too. But yeah, so I just think that normally, unless it's a budget matter where we're trying to pass the money, like with the school, there isn't an immediate revote. You know, like with the school, we will keep voting on the school budget until a budget passed. And that makes sense. And that would make sense for the police department. It would make sense for the fire department. It would make sense for the highway department. It doesn't make sense for retail cannabis. And again, I'm not against retail cannabis. I'm not against it. Like St. Albans wants retail cannabis, great. If Swanton wants retail cannabis, that's fine too. But why do we need to have it at the Masons Lodge? You know, why is that all locked up already when there's the vote hadn't even happened and it was locked? That just sounds weird to me.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about that. If I don't know if your friend would be willing to talk to me, but I'd certainly look into that more if it was possible.
Yeah, definitely not sure.
Yeah, we could talk about that later. So listen, I asked your son the same question. What would it take for you to vote in favor of retail cannabis?
So again, I'm not against it. Like I had
I
told
know,
you,
I know. I'm just saying, what would it, is it just
I
a
guess
different location
for
or?
here, if I knew that people weren't trying to stick their fingers in the pie before the pie was even baked, I would have voted for it. And I did vote for it before I knew that people were sticking in their fingers in the unbaked pie. I did vote yes. It's just the when the second vote came and the second time, knowing what I knew, I just didn't feel in good conscience that I could vote for it, because it was like, this is already a done deal. So it really doesn't matter what my vote is. It's not going to matter if I vote yes or if I'm going to vote no, because the powers that be have already decided how this is going to go.
It does seem like that, and it's like, if that one didn't pass, what's to say they don't just hold another one next month?
Right. Or who's to say, like, again, some of these numbers have come out. It was like 8:20 and the polls had only closed at like 7:00.
I noticed too, I was waiting for one of the last special cannabis meeting that was held in Swanton. And usually they update their videos every day or every 2 days. And I noticed they waited it's been like 5 days now, and they just barely posted it on the YouTube page after the election was over.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer. I really wanted to watch that and maybe talk to some of those people that were commenting, but conveniently it wasn't available until just like on my drive home an hour ago.
Right. So, I mean, it just seems like all signs, if you're looking at the signs, point to shady AF.
Sure. Well, Suzie, I really appreciate your perspective. I'm going to dig into this more. We might circle back later if that's okay with you.
Hey, I'm available.
Yeah, I just want to say, your son is going to take some shit for those comments, but it sounds like, to me anyway, that there is a legitimate conflict of interest concern here.
Yeah. That's the way we felt. And again, like, my son thinks for himself, all my children do. You know, if some might say we've raised them a little too military. My husband's a veteran too, but we've taught them to think for themselves and to think on their feet and to make decisions for themselves. And we just all came to the same conclusion. So it seemed like we were on the right track.
And you say you're married?
I am married. Yeah, my husband is an Army veteran.
And how does he feel about all this stuff? or you don't have to answer that, but if you'd like to share, I'm curious.
So he also feels like this stinks, like he's not for retail cannabis. And I think that's because of his job as a federal law enforcement officer. And the fact that in the Fed mindset, it's still illegal. Doesn't matter what the states say. It's federally, it's still legal. It's bad. Blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
sure.
He doesn't mind my use of it. But he just doesn't see the need for a retail market when you have the medical dispensaries for people who have, issues that need it. So he's for a medical dispensary, but not for a retail dispensary. But when we started to hear about the Masons' involvement, that's when like he really became adamant that he was not going to vote for it.
Interesting. So the whole family's kind of on that team.
Yeah,
which is strange because you're a user, your husband's not. It's quite a mixed crowd you get over there, Suzie.
we do. I'm a liberal, they're conservative. It's crazy. It's crazy in this house. We agree to disagree on many, many things.
Well, that was one thing I noticed about your son, was that even though we might have some disagreements, he's not like, he doesn't resort to calling me names or, hiding from the questions. He's willing to stand up for his vote, and stand behind what he voted for, which I respect a lot.
Yep.
Especially from a young kid, boy, I've seen adults that are much more irrational than your son.
Yeah. He's going to go far, I can tell.
I hope so. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up right here, Suzie. I really want to thank you again for stopping by and sharing your thoughts with us. It's not everybody who, is on the other side of this kind of thing or disagrees wants to talk. So I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I hope we can do this again sometime, Suzie.
All right. You take care, Caleb.
You too.